So can everyone see me and hear me if I position myself here? So I start off by saying good afternoon. I'm a frequent visitor to Thailand. I think possibly I've been coming here for about 25 years. And I lived in Malaysia for a number of years, so I used to come here about every 3 weeks. Not so much now, I'm back in London, but I do have some insight into the Thai education system and Thai universities. So if I could start off by introducing who I am. My name is Colin Kerrigan. Until a few years ago I was based at a big university in London called University of the Arts London, and I was Director of International Development there. So my job took me all over the world. And we developed lots and lots of international projects. That was the main thing that I was involved in. Before that, I was based in one of the colleges at University of the Arts London called Central St Martin's College of Art and Design. And at Central St Martin's College of Art and Design, I was a principal lecturer in art and design. I'm working as an executive director for the school called ISCA, International School of Creative Arts. And this afternoon what I'm going to talk to you about is the way that the whole view and the perception of art and design has changed over the last few years, and the career opportunities that have come about in art and design. But before I do that, I'd like to sort of spend a few sentences, a few minutes, talking about how ISCA came about. For a number of years, when I was at University of the Arts London, we invested a considerable amount of effort in developing our programs in many different countries around the world. Because the University of the Arts London, some of you may know, is a very, very big university. In fact, it's the largest university of art, design, media and communication in the whole of Europe. It has in excess of 27,000 students, all doing creative studies. And we used to have thousands of applications from around the world. And my job was to actually select all the students and to manage the international projects. What we found is that, and I'm sure you all know this anyway, but education systems are vastly different. So the way we teach art and design in London is very different from the way art and design is taught in Shanghai or Beijing or Tokyo. It's a whole different point of view. So that our methodology of teaching, we found it difficult because of our approach to art and design to actually have an insight into the quality of some of the candidates who are getting to some of our most competitive courses. So we invested time and money into running and conducting portfolio development classes. Because essentially what we look for, not just at University of the Arts London, but within the UK, it's all about the development of a portfolio. It's the process of developing an idea. And when I'm talking to a student, say at Tokyo University of Art and Design, they would be talking to me about the product. I'd be talking about the process. If I went to Beijing, they'd talk about the product. We'd once again be talking about the process. So we invested this money into creating portfolio development centres, so that students who wish to go to undergraduate degree courses or postgraduate or doctoral courses at University of the Arts could attend classes to prepare their portfolio. ISCA was one of those projects, because we prepared portfolios at all of the different levels, from A-level, pre-university standard, which is A-level, right the way through to PhD or doctoral level. And ISCA was one project of many, many projects we set up. We set up portfolio development centres in Korea, South Korea. We set them up 3 in China, 2 in India, 1 in Russia, in South America, across Europe. ISCA was the one that we established in the UK. And part of my project when I was back in the UK was to oversee ISCA from my university post. But I got so involved in it, I decided to step out of the university and become the first executive director of ISCA. So what is ISCA about? It's tiny. It's the opposite of University of the Arts London. University is the biggest, where I spent most of my career. I'm now the executive director of a tiny school. It's very small. And we want it to remain small. We want ISCA to be niche. We want it to be a small school. Because the philosophy is a little different from the big universities. Our philosophy is we want to bring out the best in all of our students. And because we're an international school, and students come to us from all over the world, they all come to us with different experiences. And rather like those portfolio development centres I spent many years setting up in other countries, ISCA students require a lot of care and attention when they first come. What is the care and attention they need? They need to be able to understand not just the technical things in art and design, but they need to understand the creative things in art and design. This doesn't seem to be working very well, this projector. Would you mind sitting here and I must be clicking the wrong thing because nothing's... Now it's back on. Is it 2 clicks? Not 1 click, it's 2, by the looks of it. Okay. Okay, that's fine?
Yeah,
Price is over. That's good. So, with ISCA, it's about bringing together not just the skills, but the creativity. So, on our campus, which is a campus with beautiful campus located near to the main airport in the UK, Heathrow Airport. It's in a beautiful location. It's between a place called Gerrard's Cross and Slough, right in the countryside, near to the film studios, and near to a lot of very, very good facilities. Probably about 20 minutes from Heathrow Airport by taxi. So we've got a beautiful, beautiful site, purpose-built studios, but the main focus is to get all of the students up to the same standard so they can all work with art and design in the same way. So right at the beginning of our course is to develop that fundamental skill of developing ideas and having the technical ability. And because we are a boarding campus, we can run classes whenever we want to run classes. The ISCA method is that we have the studios open till 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, and frequently at the weekends we have visiting artists and designers coming in. So it's a pretty packed program. So we have this packed program getting the students to the same standard. And we have a unique relationship with the University of the Arts London. In the second year of our A-level studies, our students attend 1 day a week to a very famous college called Central St Martin's College, where they not only gain experience of university education, and obviously being at a university 1 day a week is important for them because they have to work differently. It's a much bigger place. It makes them grow up in many ways. But they also gain an insight into university teaching and learning. So they're doing this in ISCA, very small situation, very nurturing situation, 1 day a week in a massive situation. Central St Martin's is an enormous college. So they have the best of both worlds really, the small, the nurturing, and the big where they're exposed to many, many different ideas. So this way of working is the only, ISCA is the only school that Central St Martin's offers this arrangement. Now, because they offer this arrangement, it means that our students can fast track. So they've come to ISCA to do either 1 year portfolio or 2 years of A-level. In the second year of their A-level, they spend 1 day a week at Central St Martin's, where they start the foundation course. All universities of art and design either do a freshman or a foundation year. It's diagnostic, where they try all of the different subjects out. So my students do that 1 day a week at Central St Martin's. At the end of their A-level, they then go back to Central St Martin's if they wish to finish, we call it FAT+. It's the Fast Track Foundation course, which they do during the summer holiday. So in 2 years they can do their A-levels and their foundation course. Now, many students really like that idea. The reality is, though, to do that, they need to be very hard-working students. The track record we have is of one success. We've been now running for 9 years. We get around 98% success. We always say 98, even if it's 100. We never say 99. Because if we ever slip a little bit, people say you failed. So we say it's around 98%. It's usually 100%. But what we've noticed over the past couple of years is whilst our students really love the experience of going to University of the Arts or Central St Martin's in particular, one or two of them are starting to say, I want to go to other universities. And obviously we don't discourage you, we encourage it. So we've built up great working relationships with University College London, particularly the Architecture and the Fine Art Department. Have a superb architectural school there, the Bartlett School of Design. We've built up very good working relationship with University of London Goldsmiths College, University of Westminster and University of Kingston. So we've got, apart from UAL, University of the Arts London, we have very good working relationships with other top London universities. In addition to that, because of my prior world in the University of the Arts, I have personally good relationships with Parsons in New York, University of Chicago, University Institute in Chicago, University in California, University of the Arts of California, and Rhode Island School of Design, and one or two universities in Europe, namely Marangoni and the schools in Paris, the fashion ateliers in Paris. But most of them we foresee will stay in London, but we have these, we've actually built up good working relationships with other universities. What does this A-level plus programme mean? It's not just an A-level. Obviously we've spoken about the Central St Martin's dimension, but there's another dimension too. When the students come into our Year 1 study, we've got a unique working relationship with an examining body called OTHM, so that all of the students do Diploma Level 3. It's equivalent to A-level. So Year 1, they take diplomas. We've done this because the diplomas ensure that we teach them all of the fundamental skills. The diplomas are more technically based, so the first year is grounding in all of the techniques. The techniques, whether it's going to be three-dimensional design, spatial or product design, graphic design, animation, illustration, all the subjects within graphic design, in fine art, painting, sculpture, installation, in fashion design, the whole range of fashion, including jewellery or textile design, so that within the diploma studies they are taught all of the fundamental techniques. How you mix colour, how you draw from anything, how you make a garment, how you make a model for architecture, how you would actually work out various spatial design sort of motifs. So they are taught these different techniques. So with the diploma level study, each diploma with OTHM is worth, because it's level 3, 1.5 A levels. Now obviously it's meaningful when they go to university, it's tariff points. You need points to go to universities in the UK. So they're gaining points in their first year. So if their A-level grades went down a little bit, they have points in their first year with diploma studies. But the diploma studies Year 1 within the A-level plus programme are all about gaining skills, working skills. The Year 2 they do A2 A-level, and they take the subjects forward into A-level and simultaneously start working at University of the Arts. So they are very qualified when they finish ISCA. They will have diplomas, they will have their A-levels, and they'll have finished their foundation diploma at the University of the Arts London. So very, very well qualified. The last couple of months we've put another layer in there, and we're now doing pre-A-level studies. And funnily enough, it's interesting for a number of Thai students I've found, because there are a number of Thai students who are applying to me and they hadn't been to international schools, so they hadn't got IGCSEs, they'd been to local Thai independent schools and they'd got Thai qualifications. But with the A-level preparation, we can offer some IGCSEs. So we condense it into 6 months from January to June before the A-level. And we can offer IGCSE in English and IGCSE in art. And the chance of building up a substantial portfolio. So we've just put in this extra layer of qualifications. So I foresee that that will be something that will grow. I would like to make an IGCSE platform for more than 2 subjects to have a full range of subjects. Okay? Prior to coming on the course at ISCA, we start to work with our students right after they accept their place. And we call it, the way they work with us is called ISCA Live. They work online with us. And we do several tutorials with them. The online tutorials are important because we view the art design sort of industry to be very much international. Whatever projects you're doing nowadays, you're working very often transnationally. So graphic design is not just working on a project very often in London, they may be talking to a colleague in Paris or in New York. So we want our students to understand how you work remotely, how you can actually build up a good working relationships with someone on the internet. So the ISCA Live develops their skills of working remotely. It also gives them a chance to make friends with other students. So we create a platform so before they come to London, they're talking to other students from all over the world. So once they come into ISCA, they start to feel at home and sort of have made some friends. They've also got used to a different teaching methodology, a different way of teaching. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment, how we actually teach. You'll see here the lady with the pink hair. Are any of you familiar with fashion design? This lady was one of the original punk rockers. Her name is Zandra Rhodes. And Zandra Rhodes, believe it or not, is 80 years of age. And she is an amazing tutor. She'll occasionally come in and help us out and do a master class. She's a bundle of energy. She's a great teacher. And she's someone who chooses to still want to teach some of the time. So we're very fortunate for her to come into us. We also have other really sort of iconic designers coming in. Have you all heard of Jimmy Choo, the shoe designer? And Jimmy Choo, he would come in because he and I were professors at University of the Arts London together. So he's a friend of mine. So he does a bit of teaching. And we have lots of other younger designers who are less famous than those who will come in. Because we think it's important for our students to expose them to success. So someone like Zandra Rhodes talks to them about how she made a career in design. Jimmy Choo talks about being a young man with no money and no background at all, came to London and how he built up one of the world's biggest design companies. So it's good for them to have those examples and those role models. So what ISCA does in this small place is give students support in many different ways. So I'd like to focus on how we actually teach. What do we teach at ISCA? We teach students to work in this process-based way. We say that the journey towards the idea is as important as the finished product. Why do we say that? Why do we always say that it's important to teach you the process? For one main reason, because we believe, and I think all good schools and universities believe this, that we're preparing students for life. We're not preparing them to get their exam this year. We're preparing them for life. We're saying that we want you to have a long and relevant career, so that as industry changes, and it's changing all the time, the requirements of industry change all the time, society changes, we want our students to be able to change with the industry and change with society as it changes. So essentially at the heart of what we teach transferable skills. We say it's really important that when you're a professional designer or an artist, you're equipped with this range of skills so that you can actually take charge of your studies, so that you can actually present yourself in a professional way no matter what situation you find yourself in. So right at the heart of what we teach at ISCA, we teach communication skills. We teach our students so that they can draw, as you see here. If they want to be a fashion designer, they can draw fashion. If they want to be an architect, they can draw the way an architect draws. If they want to be an illustrator, they can illustrate children's books. If they want to be a fine artist, they can draw the model. They can draw anything. They must have right at their heart, all of them, strong visual communication skills. Equally, they must be able to write things clearly. Our students will be living in a world, we want them to be design managers, not design technicians. We want them to be the manager of the project. If you manage a project, the first thing someone says is, give me a concept sheet, write it down. What have you been thinking about? Just give me some notes. And if you cannot write those first notes, the first outline for a concept, you could never be the design director. You've got to be able to write. You've got to be able to write clearly and succinctly. We teach them critical and creative writing. We also teach them to be able to be confident, and I met a couple of students here this afternoon, and I was saying to them, what do you think you've really learned from your international school? Sometimes not really good art, but what they've really learned from their international schools is how to be confident. We teach our students to be confident. We want them to feel that they can actually take a platform, stand up and talk. They can walk into a group of strangers and present their work. They can actually take criticism from a group of strangers and listen carefully and respond to what's being said. They've got to be able to present themselves. So, as I see a couple of students I've met this afternoon, we further develop that confidence that international education most definitely gives to young people. So communication skills at the heart of what we do. But in addition to that, as a creative designer or artist, you have to be someone who owns the concept. So we teach them how to develop concepts. So when you're looking at work like this, it's not a finished product, it's visual thinking. It's all visual thinking. It's the artist or designer researching, developing ideas, sifting through ideas almost like a scientist in an empirical way, checking things out, testing them out, and developing slowly but surely a series of ideas. We teach how to develop concepts, and to develop concepts from primary research and secondary research, from things you're looking at or things they're directly referring to, or things they're reading about, or things that other people have done, and how to collate and sift through that research in order so they can develop concepts. If they can develop concepts and own a concept, they can actually be a design director. If you're just carrying out someone else's concept, you're not the director. So we want our students to go to that level where they can be in charge of the concept, because they know how to develop concepts. So all of these works, they are small studies. They're looking at the world in different ways, using a range of different ideas, a lot of different techniques, developing concepts for graphic design, for architecture, for three-dimensional design, for experimental fashion design. That's at the heart of what we do. We believe that's the right way of starting off for A-level and foundation education, and it's exactly what the universities in the UK are looking for, or in America or in Europe. Because what they want is, they want students who are not passive learners. Mustn't be passive, just sitting there. Teach me. Tell me what you want me to think. What do you want me to do? They don't want that. They want students who are objectively questioning things, students who know where to find information, and can actually be both taught and can teach themselves when the tutor walks out of the room. Because we all want that. If you're going to employ someone, you have to feel, if I walk out, they carry on working. So right from the beginning at ISCA, we're not just saying you're completely independent. That would be ridiculous. They're too young to be independent. But we're starting that journey towards being more independent. That journey where they're starting to make more decisions for themselves. that journey where we're teaching them where to go to get the information from, and to start to piece concepts together. So the next part of that puzzle, of this way of working, this way of developing these core or critical skills or transferable or flexible skills, is to work contextually, to be able to work within a context. So all of our students would not only do studio-based activity, they would do critical and contextual studies. So that whatever you're doing in design, you think, why do we design the way we design this way today? Why? Why do we do art the way we do art this way today? What are the bigger issues in society? For example, if you think of, say, the 19th century in France, in Paris. The 19th century Paris dominated the artistic world as it was then. It was mainly centred in Paris. So all of the famous artists, most of the important practitioners in art and sculpture were based in Paris. What was so important about Paris? Why did they paint the way they painted in Paris? The big movement in the 19th century, some of you may know, was called Impressionism. And you see all of these paintings by Monet and Renoir and all of the wonderful light paintings of light, wonderful subtle paintings. Why did the Impressionists paint that way? So if you take a broad look contextually, you'd say France had a revolution. France actually was at the technological cutting edge of things. So think of the revolution for a moment. What was the revolution about? It was about giving ordinary people more of a voice. So when you look at the Impressionist paintings, and I think you have some in Bangkok in the main museum here, you find them. I used to, when I lived in Malaysia, we had some there. We have some in Singapore when I lived there. So you can see the actual works in Southeast Asia. You'll notice the main thing about Impressionist painting is it was a break with tradition. The artists were painting ordinary people, not famous people, ordinary people doing ordinary things. They were celebrating ordinary every day. People sitting eating in a cafe, having a drink of wine in a cafe, children playing in the park. Not just generals, not important people. Because of the French Revolution, the focus of art changed. That was the context that changed. Another example would be if you went to Beijing. I don't know if any of you have been to Beijing, and you look at the big public sculptures in Beijing. They celebrate power and the government, the big public art, because of the revolution in the 1960s. The art reflects the social situation in China in the 1960s. In Paris, they actually represented the social situation in Paris in the 19th century. Another area would be if you went to Russia. I was in Russia a couple of weeks ago. You look at the wonderful art that was done in the old Soviet Union. It was all about the revolution. The context of the revolution, the posters, the abstraction of the work. They said history had stopped and had started again. Get rid of all of the old-fashioned things. Let's move forward in a brave new world. So the revolution changed the art. If I go to somewhere like Japan, Japan is different again. The social context in Japan is very different from Europe. And the way that artists paint in Japan, it's very much based on the natural world and the harmonious way that things fit together within the natural world. The context is different. So we teach our students to be able to work contextually. One is the political situation. The other one is the technological situation. There was no sort of accident that the Impressionists painted the way they painted because photography had been developed. And they were doing quick paintings, like quickly taking a photograph, snapshots. So the technology influenced them as well. So our students, we teach them to look at things in 360 degrees. That way of looking and researching and analysing is something that stays with them throughout their university studies and their professional careers. So we're thinking those transferable skills to be ability to communicate in all different ways. the ability to develop ideas. Got to be able to develop ideas and own the idea. The ability to think broadly and contextually. To understand my subject, it's an old-fashioned saying in the UK, I need to read around the subject, not just read the subject. I read about all the things that influence the subject. That's having a contextual view, yeah? And right at the heart of it, the other main way of working is to be critical. So throughout their education at ISCA, we actually have critiques where students present their work to each other, to their teachers, and take the criticism of their peers. Because later on, if they go to Central St Martin's, if they go to University College London, if they then become a designer like Alexandra Rhodes, everyone will be critiquing their work. So bit by bit we build up their resilience so they can take criticism in a positive way. They've got to be able to think and respond to people being critical about their work. So that's why we work in this way. That's why we build their education up so they can look at their work from all of these different points of view. Because the journey we're going towards is to get them into a top university. The top universities value the critical and the creative thinking, all of those things I've just described. And they want it to be that way so they can then say, we can now take your studies further. You have the core skills. So ISCA's job really is to give them the fundamental core skills so they can move forward. So when you look at some of these works, none of them are finished works. They are the journey, the route towards finished work. If we sort of now, as we go through, this is towards fashion, photography, towards accessory design, and then we just start to move now more towards the products. We believe that if they've done all of this critical and creative thinking, when they start to come into developing actual products, their products for fashion, their products for architecture, their products for textiles will be much improved. Because this way of working makes you question so much and rethink so much. You're not just being obvious. You're not just doing the first thing you thought about. You can work with architecture such as this one in a more open-ended and experimental way. Universities, that's what they want. Universities want you to say, I want to be an architect. My job whilst I'm doing undergraduate study is to find out what architecture means, not just to copy everyone else. I want to find out how expressive I can be within architecture, to do the most challenging, the most rigorous, the most expressive architectural fashion design, the newest way of doing installation art or environmental work. Everything is about finding new ideas. So when you look at work like this, at this point it's not commercial. It isn't commercial. It's process and experiment. But it's on the brink of becoming later on to become commercial. Big question that parents usually ask me when I do these events is, how does my child make a living in art and design? Are they destined to have no job and starve? When I was a student, that was very much the case. When I was a student and my teachers wanted me to do design, it's either going to be an architect or a sculptor. So I love mathematics as well as art. And I decided I wanted to be an artist, not a designer. And I think at that stage, because of my age, art was very elitist. Doing art and going to a good art academy was the pinnacle of success. Doing design wasn't. Design was commercial. It was narrow. It was working for someone else. So I would never consider doing design. No way would I do design. However, all these years later, most of my students, whether I'm at ISCA or Central St Martin's or other places, the vast majority now do design. It's all changed the other way around. And the smaller group do art. The reason is that the creative industries have never been more successful, have never been bigger. What are the creative industries? If we think, say, in the UK, it's a massive industry. It's not just the artists. Art is a big industry in the UK. We actually have more listed creative artists in London than anywhere else in Europe. There are thousands of listed artists just in London. So art is big business in London. And creative sort of experimental fine art, big business. Lots of galleries. We have in the central London area in excess of 300 contemporary art galleries. So it's big business. They wouldn't survive unless they were making money. So art is business. But that's only one small bit of the equation. What we have in London is a massive design industry. And we have a massive publishing industry. We have a massive television industry. We have a massive photography industries, a massive sort of cinema industry. All various aspects of the creative industry, the creative activities that make up the creative industries. In fact, when I was at the University of the Arts, we sort of did some research, and London now, at this point, it sort of exchanges with New York every couple of years, is now the biggest financial centre. New York was, but it's slightly smaller than London. But on a par with London as a financial centre is the creative industry. It's as big as the City of London, the financial area of London. It's massive and it's growing. And it will continue to grow. And I'm involved in various projects in this part of the world, not in Thailand, but I've been involved in Malaysia, Singapore and Taiwan, where many governments are now saying that we want to invest in the creative industries because the creative industries mean money. They're doing this for one big reason, well, actually two reasons. One is called China and the other one's called India. Because the manufacturing base in China, which I go to frequently, I have a professor's job in China, so I'm there a lot of the time. It is enormous, as we all know, productivity. But at this point, it doesn't have the creative aspect. It doesn't have the design, but it has enormous productivity. And what smaller economies are doing is they are thinking, and I agree with them, to actually get the edge, to get the value added, you must invest in the design to make the product even better, to make the product stand out. So apart from the UK, America and Europe, where design is very big, I would foresee that in Southeast Asia and East Asia, design is going to continue to get more and more important and bigger. Because for products to stand out, you have to invest in those products. I was thinking, I do some work in South Korea. And in South Korea, the textile industry has suffered quite a lot because of the Chinese imports. But what they're investing in Korea is to try and become an Italy, where the textile industry is small but it's robust. It's robust because Italian textiles is fine quality. And I cannot foresee it being wiped out because with cheap imports, because we know with Italian textiles at a certain level, it's beautiful quality, it's beautiful design. So it's all about investing in the quality of the products. So the range of careers within the creative industries in many countries in the world is expanding. So it's no longer just art and a little bit of design. Design has become part of the mainstream. It's something that is part of everything that we do now. It's very strange, and it's changing as lifestyles change. Because if you take, say, fashion design, for example, fashion design used to mainly just be focused on women's wear. It isn't anymore, it's on men's wear. Men like to have good fashions too. Children, sportswear. Everything is changing within the fashion design area. If you think of, say, spaces between buildings, environmental spaces, every major developing country is investing in those spaces. To have public sculptures, to have gardens, to have beautiful places to sit or to sort of have leisure activity. As lifestyles have changed, so the investment in those art and design activities are becoming more in the foreground. So I see ISCA very much at the start of that journey. And for ISCA to succeed, and we are succeeding, it has to have that equal balance of skills. You've got to give young people the skills. Those are the skills they'll have for the rest of their lives. How you make something, how you actually prepare something, how you make something to the high standard. If you're doing a production in theatre design such as this, how you'd not only make the things, how you'd actually light it, how you'd document it, how you'd photograph it. If you're doing graphic design, how you work with different computer packages. You've got to know the skills. I don't believe you can be creative unless you have the skills. So it's always the balance of skills and creativity, whichever subject you do. I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to take any questions that any of you may have. Is art and design for some... Could I ask parents something first of all? If you have a child who's interested in art and design, did you say, oh, fantastic, I'm so pleased? Or did you say, what does that mean? What was your response to your child when they said they want to do art and design? Was it a positive response or one of confusion, or what was it? I'm looking to the parents in the room now. Give me some feedback. Anyone?
I think my reaction was, what you want to do, you have to do it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And understand where you want to
Yeah. So your child wants to do art and design. Which is your child here? Okay. What does she want to do, he or she want to do? She, is it?
Either design or architecture.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you recognise that ability? Did you recognise it?
Only in fact, she is a good artist, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of drawing.
Yes.
Yeah. And did you encourage or discourage that?
So discourage it, no?
No. You thought if you're good at it and you're working hard, go with it, yeah?
Yes.
Excellent. Any other parents? Any other parents here? What about yourself? Any response? No? You have the microphone now, you have to speak. Once she gives you the mic, isn't it awful, the microphone came out of... Okay, I have to say something.
Actually, I love the art. I would like to encourage my daughter.
You would like to encourage, yeah?
To listen more and to have more idea, more general concept.
Yeah.
And to look for information, what is the development in education.
What you really need to do, to encourage her to find out what she really needs to be successful.
I just want my daughter to learn almost everything, and which one is will be her passion,
Yeah.
and what is the next step that she would like to do.
And I think very good. I mean, both of you have very positive response. If I'd have asked that 15 years ago, it's probably not been so positive, because things have changed. The fashion industry is global. The world of architecture and spatial design is global. It's massive. And its design sort of has reached virtually all of us. It's not just for a small group in society. Everyone's interested in design to a certain extent. You look at the young people, very often young people on low income, and you look at the way they dress, the way they style themselves. It's become mainstream to be interested in fashion design. It's mainstream to want to groom yourself. It's mainstream to want to have a nicely decorated interior. It's much more part of our consciousness nowadays, because it is all around us. Everyone talks about it. It's not just for a few, it's become for the many. Just thinking, say, when I first did my international development role at Central St Martin's, I went into my very first college I linked with in Singapore. It was called Temasek College. Very good polytechnic college, very much skills based. They teach students a very good range of very good education, but they're not teaching them to be designers, they're teaching them to be technicians. And I remember saying to the dean I was working with, I said, so why are you teaching this? He said, because in this society, he said, I have to always manage the aspirations and the expectations of my students. Because in those days, Singapore has now changed, but 15, 20 years ago it was different, about 20 years ago. Singapore, they were not doing their homespun design. They were taking a package from the UK or from America or Australia, and all they were doing is interpreting it. They weren't doing their own spun design. They weren't doing their own fashion design. They weren't doing their own graphic design. So the students were being taught to interpret someone else's idea and give a kind of local twist to it. And I remember looking around the studio. No one had computers, and everyone in graphic design was using an airbrush. Do any of you remember airbrushes? So there they are with airbrushes, doing tremendous techniques with airbrushes. And I was thinking, no computers, why airbrushes? And he was saying, because many of them will get jobs, the dean said, doing airbrushing all day long for the designer. There's the senior designer, someone's just airbrushing. The only place you see airbrushing now is in a nail bar. It's just doing nails. You'd never see any airbrushing in a design studio, maybe one or two, but very, very rare. And the students were being taught with skills that would very quickly become obsolete. No one uses them unless you're working in a nail bar, certainly not a designer. So the perception was different, because design was seen as a fringe activity. But now it's seen more as a money-making activity. There's big investment going into it. I see that in the UK. I remember when I was a student, I finished my undergraduate study in the UK in the late 1970s, and I went to the United States to do my postgraduate study. I worked for an artist in the UK, then I was en route to do my MA in a college, a beautiful college called Bennington College in Vermont. I wanted to go to Bennington because all the artists I loved had worked at Bennington College. It was the time when there was a big crisis. There was the big oil crisis. I don't know if any of you are my age who can remember that, the big oil crisis in the 1970s. It was terrible. So I went to the American dream and found there wasn't a dream anymore. People were fighting in the gas stations because they were running out of petrol. And imports, all the cars were being imported into the States from Japan, not Korea so much then, mainly Japan, and electrical goods from Taiwan and Korea. And Americans were going crazy. Jobs were being lost. They were throwing cars off into the lakes in Lake Michigan. There were big sort of, not quite rioting, but big demonstrations. In my own country, back in England, the whole of the north of England was going out of business. All the heavy industry was disappearing. And I remember at that time, as a younger person, I was thinking, what the hell is the future? How can we move forward on this? And there were some people I met and got to know through my professors when I was in the States. And their thinking was, they exposed me to completely different thinking. And their thinking was about software, not hardware. They were talking about shifting the whole emphasis in the States, not completely, but shifting a dual emphasis on software. And many of them were actually the people I knew, the older generation, were very much supporters of the UK, Anglophiles they call. And they were talking about the crisis of the UK at that time. And they're thinking about shifting towards software in the UK, so service industries, to idea generation rather than making things, about owning the recipe to the cake rather than just making the cake. And it was this great period of shifting from just making, which I still very much believe in, and I love manufacturing, but to have an equal balance with designing, with the software. And at that time there was massive sort of investment in education in the UK and in the US. And that's when all of the big art and design schools were growing and being invested in. And you see today that the culmination of that is that design isn't just a nice activity, it's a money-making activity. There's a big, I think you have it in Thailand, there's a big supermarket in the UK called Tesco. I think you have it in Thailand, do you? Yeah. Tesco? And I was looking at some of the shirts in Tesco recently, because I do projects in India as well. And it's beautiful on the label, it says, designed in London, made in India. So suddenly on the label, design is on the label, design. And it's shifting the other way in China. Burberry, very much a British fashion brand. In China they're saying, we want the Burberry made in London. Well, it's not London, but in the UK. We want the Burberry made in the UK, not in China. So the snob value is, can I have it made in the UK, please? It's strange how things change. But design and manufacturing niche markets have changed things. I gave you a pause so parents could think of a question for me. Any more questions? Anything from parents, please? Yeah. You have to have a question or I'll give another anecdote. Okay. Yeah.
Based on understanding, is that the school ISCA is for preparing the student 2 years before they enter to the university.
University preparation.
Okay. In case that my child really want to join the ISCA, what criteria or what portfolio that my child has to...
What do they need? Okay, that's a really good question. And actually I should have mentioned that. The starting point for doing art and design, as the gentleman here said, you observed your daughter drawing. You have to be fascinated by the visual world. If you want to be an architect, if you want to be a fashion designer, you have to have a passion for drawing. However, some of my students who are naturally gifted in drawing don't always go as far as those who love drawing but struggle in drawing. It's strange. You get some who are really, really good at drawing from an early age, and they somehow, when they come in, and I'm thinking of my days at Central St Martin's, they weren't always the ones who got the first class honours. Sometimes having the natural ability, it just comes naturally, doesn't always mean that you become the one who stands out in the end. Have any of you heard of an artist called Van Gogh? Or Van Gogh, you may say. Someone who certainly struggled to draw and paint, had the passion but didn't have the natural ability. In fact, his drawing is incredibly clumsy. His painting was incredibly clumsy. But he strived to get the very best he could be. So we're always looking for someone not with natural ability, not with the great high-level natural ability, but the real emotional attachment to want to draw and to want to paint, a fascination with the visual world. I was interviewing a student in Moscow a couple of weeks ago, and all she had is just drawings of people, a family. She got lots and lots of portraits, nothing more, just portraits of the family. Beautiful drawings. So she would be a superb student for ISCA. I interview other students. I've seen a couple here this afternoon going to international schools. They have lots of typical project work, lots of themes, whether drawing, painting, using mixed media. They would be a good student from ISCA. But right at the heart, they need to have a visual sensibility. The visual world is the world they will be sort of working in. And as artists or designers, you're always evaluating things visually. You're learning to read with your eyes. Your eyes are your tools. You're always looking at things visually, looking at proportions, looking at distances between things, looking at the light and dark tones, the silhouettes, the shapes, the spaces. That's what all designers and artists do. So it's the passion for drawing. We don't expect a substantial portfolio, but that passion and that involvement. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah?
One more question.
That has a mind of its own, that microphone, doesn't it?
When the student in first year of the student, they have to study every fundamental subject?
No.
Or they, for example, if any student really want to be to study to be an architecture, they have to participate.
Very good question again. So when they come, first of all, we do everything. The first few weeks we study everything, because students are deciding that year one of A-level they do those diplomas. So they're deciding what do they really want to do. And we are teaching them core skills, the drawing, the colour, the model making, photo media, how to use computers, all of those core activities, so they've got the skills. Then they're deciding on subjects. And very often students come to us and they say two things. They say, I want to be an artist. It's most of the schools, the teachers are art teachers, they're not designers. I want to be an artist, or some of them actually say, I want to be a fashion designer. Generally the ones who want to be fashion designers stick to it. They are the most stubborn of all the fashion designers. So whatever you test out and try different things, they start wanting to do fashion design, very often they stay with it. The artists are less so. The ones who say, I want to be an artist. Big groups, I want to be an artist. Then you say, okay, we do a 3D product design project. They change their mind. They've never done one before. Or you do a project that's towards architecture. They change their mind again. So we test out what they're saying. Generally two groups. One or two may say architecture, but vast majority, I want to be an artist or I want to be a fashion designer. But the projects we do, 2D projects, spatial projects, problem-solving projects, we're testing out what they're really interested in. And then when they're doing 3 subjects, they still haven't decided, they're still doing a range of subjects for the A-level or the diplomas. So they're still sort of maybe doing 2D design and 3D design and an art as well, or a history of art. So they're not really locked into one area. Some of them change their mind in the second year. And the reason it doesn't really matter is because the universities, the top universities, don't want them to be formed. They don't want them to have a fixed idea anyway. So if you went along to CSM and you said, this student's done lots and lots of fine art work and has done only a little bit of fashion design, they wouldn't care. They're looking at the quality of the student. They don't expect them to have fully finished fashion designs. They want them to have experimental designs. They want them to know the design process, but nothing's fixed. But we do a lot of changing of minds all the way through. But the main teaching are the core skills. If they have those core skills, they can transfer that into any design area. Does that answer your question?
One last question.
Yeah.
How much for the tuition?
Can Krutoohomeeducation do that? Because it's all written down. They've got it all written down, the tuition. At the end, they'll have it all written down for you. Any other questions?
Actually, I have. My background is in engineering, so
Interior?
Engineering.
Oh, engineering, yeah.
So when they try to coach my kid on art, it's pretty much almost close to zero. Okay. So when you talk about art, it's quite difficult for me to understand how you measure passion. Let's say you have a lot of kids and you want to select some of the kids to university. How do you really measure?
It is tough.
Yes.
It is tough, but I mean, you find
Very subjective.
it can be subjective. It can really be subjective. But because of the way when I was an admissions tutor at the university, you actually ask questions from different points of view. First of all, what you're really testing when you're an admissions tutor, whether it's for undergraduate, postgraduate or PhD, you're always testing how much is that person you're looking at and how much is their teacher in the background. Because someone comes with all of this work and you think, wonder if this is the result of a great professor who's coached them, or is this the result of a bad professor who's given them the wrong information? You're trying to understand what is them and what's their teacher. That's the first thing you do when you're an admissions tutor. then by the questions that I ask, I wouldn't be saying, tell me what that means. What's this about? What's that about? I'd always be saying to someone, I'd say, all right, this is what you have. You explain to me how you came about that. What was the process, the journey to doing that? Okay, that's where we are. So that's how you arrived at that. Now tell me, if we were to actually stand back and look at it together, how would you evaluate that? What do you think works? What do you think doesn't work? Okay, you think that works. How would you take the bit that works forward? How would you further develop it? So you're always testing someone's understanding of something, and through that understanding and the way they talk to you, you have to make a judgment about their commitment. It's not so much passion, it's their commitment to what they're doing. It's the way you ask a question. I drive my engineers mad when I work with them. I love working with engineers. So I make big public sculpture. The engineers hate working with me. But I love working with them because engineers, I love it because they solve a problem. So I say to them, I want this sculpture to be balancing on the edge of that building like that. And they say, no, you can't do that. I say, but we have to do that. How can we do it? And I can see an engineer, the mathematics starts going in their mind. They're finding ways of doing it. And the more I'm pushing, the more they're saying, it's ridiculous, we can't do it. But then they always have to, like Pavlov's dog, find a solution. Because they're problem solvers. So, how do you do that? There is always a way of doing that. So engineering, I think, is very creative. It's a different form of creativity, isn't it? I'm looking at what's happening outside of the object. My engineer's thinking what's happening inside to make the damn thing balance. I'm looking superficially, and they're looking at the internal mechanism of it. If I do a water feature, how do you get the water to move around? I want the water to do this. I give someone the problem to solve it for me. But I think engineers and artists and designers can work together well. But I would see engineering, and I think of the great works of engineering, as incredibly creative. Look at someone like Brunel. What in staggering creativity. It's problem solving at the highest level, isn't it? And most designers don't all talk in that sort of superficial, sort of expressive way. Many designers can be just as studious as an engineer. Artists probably less so, but designers, product designers or fashion designers do really work in a kind of problem-solving way too. They need the science. In fact, with my students at ISCA, all of them have to do functional mathematics. Not just the architects, but everyone does functional mathematics. And some of the art students hate it. They come in saying, I can't do mathematics. But actually they have to. If you want to make a garment, you've got to know how to measure. If you want to be a package designer, you've got to know how to work accurately with materials. You have to quantify. You have to know how to order things and put things together. So we make them all do functional mathematics. So right at the heart of what we do. So I love mathematics anyway. I think artists and designers have to have a fundamental mathematical knowledge. It's not all about passion. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Anyone else? What about some of the young people here? Do you have any questions? If you, at the end, when we finished, if you prefer not to ask a question now, but you want to ask me individually, I'd be very happy to answer questions. I've really enjoyed talking to you this afternoon. I hope that was interesting for you. I'm going to leave a lot of literature here, and the literature will be about our summer schools, our pre-A-level programme, which starts in January, and our one-year portfolio programme together with our 2-year A-level plus programme. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed working with you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.